Warning, the following podcast is a shit show, and the individuals you are about to meet are idiots. Their opinions, anecdotes, and advice contain zero nutritional value. This is the critical human condition and all of its strangeness. This is life, according to an idiot.
Jeremy, I am so jazzed up for the new year.
I bet you are.
2020.
I can't believe it's already 2017. Can you believe it? 2020. Hindsight is 2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
It's the first time we're seeing in 2020. Wow. You ever heard that joke 50 times?
We're both wearing glasses right now, so...
Yes, it's a joke for those nerds out there.
All you nerds will get that.
So if there's one thing you know about me, it's that I love New Year's resolutions.
You do, yeah.
I do, yeah.
Yes.
I doubt you have any, because last year you didn't, because I remember.
You're correct in assuming. However, I do have some.
I remember last year and the prior years, you said you don't have specific resolutions, but you have code words that you like to live by, which I think is nifty, and I like that.
Yeah.
And I'm retroactively applying those for myself.
Okay.
So 2018 for me was the year of self-discovery. 2019 was the year of stepping out of my comfort zone. I did a lot of that, and it was pretty cool.
Right.
And this year, actually, let me recap what last year's resolutions were. I have them on my phone.
Yeah.
I didn't write them. 200 downloads per episode for our podcast, and we crushed it. Honestly, I was not expecting it, but we crushed it back in like June, I think.
Yeah, that's about.
Which is really good. So, got that one done. Crossed that one out pretty early. That was really exciting, and that was cool.
It was.
I wanted to take improv classes, which if you listen, you know that I did, and Jeremy joined me, which was a lot of fun.
Yes, yes.
Keep working on my mental health and happiness, which I did by writing down something positive every single day.
Oh.
I did every single day until about September, and I felt like I didn't really need to do it anymore. So until September, I wrote something positive every single day.
What's an example of that? Like positive thing in your life or just in general?
Yeah, I have some examples. Things like my first Pride Festival, starting my vegetable garden, better financial decisions, patio talks with Jeremy.
That's me.
Yeah, planting trees, pink eye from ass eating. So that's a little sample of what happened this year. So at the end of the day, I would reflect on what happened that day, and I would write down something positive.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, usually, like, if I have a really crummy day, I reflect on my day and I try to think of something positive. I realize that there's a lot more positives in my day than I originally thought.
Yeah.
And it's never as bad as I really think it is. And just taking that time to reflect at the end of the night, it was good. If you are looking for something like that to do in your own life, I would recommend it.
Unless something positive happens, like you get your journal out, you're like, what happened today?
I ate.
Oh, nothing.
I ate something, which is some things. Sometimes I had nothing, so I would write that.
Right.
But
a burger.
I had a decent meal, which some people don't have. So I guess silver lining, whatever.
That's true.
If you want to do that. I wanted to go to Seattle. That was in my New Year's resolutions, and I just did that. In December. So that was pretty cool. I did it at the last second there, but I went.
You had a very accomplished year.
Yeah, I also want to get my splits down, but that didn't happen, so.
Your what done?
My splits.
Your splits?
Yeah. I want to do that, and I completely forgot.
Like doing the splits? Like the move?
Yeah, like putting your legs apart in a split. I didn't do anything towards that. Completely ignored it.
How could you have hip implants, though, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't care. For New Year's, I wanted to do it.
Couldn't that ruin everything?
No, this will probably be fine.
I'd like to get a doctor to check in on that first.
For this year, I want to...
Oh my God, she has a planner. I didn't even see that.
Yeah, I literally have a planner out right now.
She just dropped a planner on the table.
I have a planner. This is my journal. I'm going to start journaling. That's one of my resolutions. Yeah. So last year it was writing something positive every day. And this year it's going to be journaling. So I want to do that. I want to graduate with my bachelor's. This will be my final semester.
Oh boy.
Get a job or start a master's degree. I want to travel to 2 new places. And I want to volunteer at something I'm passionate about.
I'm sure you'll do that.
What was your last year's resolution?
I think it had something to do with, I don't remember the word. It was like...
Well, we can go back and listen to it.
It's true, yeah. So it's a code word of... I find it's hard to stay motivated, especially with resolutions when they're so specific.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured if I do just a word, it's a lot easier to accomplish it and feel positive about it.
Yeah.
It also gives your year a direction to head in.
So what's your word for this year?
I was thinking discipline.
Okay, I like that.
I want to learn how to not fall back into comfort so much.
I want a very similar vibe out of my year.
Yeah,
definitely.
Fine tune what I've been trying to do as a person, and
structure.
Yeah, get serious up in here. You know,
very structured year.
Get
definitely.
adulty, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm late to everything.
Yeah.
It's like my thing. I'm always late, and it's just so it's like the worst quirk to have because
you're the late guy.
There's nothing. Sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm the clumsy one, or I'm even the guy that's the one who drinks too much. There's some level of it where it's like, oh well, he's funny and cute when he trips. This guy's late, so it's like no one can totally rely on him.
Mm-hmm.
Like
what is he doing?
What's so important?
On the bright side, having been friends with you for so long, I know to invite you early to everything.
Yeah.
So I always lie because if someone says a time for an event, Jeremy will absolutely forget what time it is.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how many times he's done it before. If it's a consistent thing, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
I will still get texts every week about what time our improv classes is, even though we've been doing it for 6 months.
Yeah, and like every other week I'll be like, hey, it's at 7, right? It's at 7. It's like spam text.
It's 6:45. It's weird though. It's weird how consistent you are because it's always exactly 20 minutes. Always on the dot, 20 minutes. See, you think that you're unreliable, but I can rely on you to show up 20 minutes late. So I always tell you a half hour early, and you show up the polite amount of early.
Yeah, because I heard somebody say, like, if you're on time, you're already late. And that stuck with me.
Yeah. When something is on time, you're 10 minutes early.
Yeah.
At least. For me, I like to get there an hour early.
You're a psycho.
Yeah, I am. I get so anxious about being late. Yeah. That I always show up way too early and then it's awkward.
Being an hour early, I think, would help anxiety, right?
Yeah, because then you can just sit in your car or something if you drove there.
You can just sit in your car for an hour and get anxious.
Yeah, well, it's weird because sometimes I'll do that and I'll get late because I'm just chilling in my car for too long.
That's happened to me before. The rare times I'm early, I'll be like, I don't want to be early. Like, I don't want to be the guy that gets there walks in there 10 minutes early.
See, that's the perfect time to come in, though.
I don't know. I just think, like, what if you get stuck having to talk to somebody who's also early? And
then you're networking. Beautiful.
But, like, have you ever seen, like, two awkward people network? You say a couple words and you look out the window. But you can't both be looking out the same window.
Yeah.
And or the same thing on the wall.
You go, how's the weather? And then you both look out the window and you're like...
Same.
Oh, it's cold today. And you're like, yeah, I noticed that when I was outside a few minutes ago.
Wind is here.
All right. Don't you hate that snow? It's the worst, buddy. When you drive. I get it.
Oh, shoes are wet and stuff. And, if someone goes, oh, this is the kind of wind that cuts straight through you. Right. It's like, yep. How do I respond to that?
And then you have like the false positivity too. I hate that. Like, hey, how you? Oh, I'm just doing great, man. I'm so excited to be here. I love it. And it's like, I know you're dying inside. You don't have to lie to me.
See, I love the fake negativity. Let's find something to bitch about because easier. It's easier to make a conversation out of pain and suffering. Yeah. I kind of enjoy that.
I enjoy that too. That can be fun.
Like showing up to a class. You ready for this class? No, I fucking hate this class. Oh, me too, dude. But you can like the class, but you'll still say, I fucking hate this class. I hate it, yeah. The teacher's sitting at the desk. I fucking hate this teacher. Just so you can.
And the teacher's like, I hate this class so much.
I fucking hate the weather.
You all gaze out the window. We never even introduced ourselves.
Oh, we didn't.
Hi, this is my podcast. Me, Kaylee.
And this is me, Jeremy.
Welcome to According to an Idiot, where we don't even remember to introduce our podcast.
That's right. Hey, hi, how are you?
All right, Jeremy, I'm going to introduce a new segment to you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna call this baby that I'm birthing from my mind.
It's breaching. I can see it. It's you're crowning. You're crowning. Oh my goodness. She's in pain.
This is called Only on the Interwebs, and it is going to be crazy shit I find on the internet. and I'm going to spread the joy to all of you as well.
Okay, so this kind of story you'd find only on the interwebs. I want to kill myself after saying that.
Only on the interwebs.
Okay.
This train is bound for glory.
So I was stumbling across Reddit, as one does, and I came across this, I want to say it's like not even a fairly popular story. You might have seen it before, but it's 4 years old now.
Okay.
So possible you haven't. Very possible most of these people listening to us haven't heard it before. But this was posted...
It's very possible the person who wrote this story is dead.
It's true.
A lot can happen in 4 years.
Yeah. It was posted on Glitch in the Matrix.
Okay.
Which I think you told me about this.
It's a subreddit.
Actually. This story really freaked me out for some reason.
Okay.
And I would like to share it. The title is A Parallel Life Awoken by a Lamp.
Whoa. Well, really quick. So Glitch in the Matrix is a subreddit that exclusively allows people to share stories of... Honestly, it's kind of hard to explain. It's not paranormal necessarily. It's just like something you can't explain that doesn't make sense in terms of science and physics almost.
Right. And this one was originally posted by Temp2 Tassoon. I am most definitely saying that wrong, but I don't know how else you would say that.
Usernames are tough to credit.
Yeah. I'm just going to say it verbatim. I'll cut like a few things out, but I like how they wrote it. It was very creepy.
For sure.
So this will all be in quotes from now on. This is the story. My last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. He was 325 pounds, and I was 120 pounds. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady. She made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years, we got married, and almost immediately she bore me a daughter. I had a great job, and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, my wife bore me a son. My son was the joy of my life. I'd walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. One day while sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D, but just wrong. I was transfixed. It was a square lamp base, red with gold trim on 4 legs, and a white square shade. I couldn't look away from it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning I didn't go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first. Soon I stopped that too. I stared at the fucking lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. My cognizance was breaking up, and my wife was freaking out. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp is not real. The house is not real. My wife, my kids, none of that is real. The last 10 years of my life are not fucking real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It took up my entire perspective, and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises, and I became aware of pain. A fucking shit ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk, surrounded by people that I didn't know, freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point, a cop scooped me up, dragged me across the sidewalk, and threw me face down in the back of a cop car. I was taken to the hospital by the cop to give CT scans and shit. Seems he didn't want to wait for the ambulance to arrive. I went through about 3 years of depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane, as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He's perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says.
I got full body goosebumps. I hate that. Wow. That's is that all of it?
Yeah.
Man, that's interesting.
Yeah. Isn't that like he lived an entire 10-year life while he was unconscious? And
I've heard of things like this happening, not to that length, but of people that are in an accident. It's not like an out-of-body experience, but it's like a cousin to that.
Mm-hmm.
You're somewhere else. You don't feel the pain. You don't even know what happened to you.
Right. But
that's insane.
It's not necessarily a coma either, because in comas, if you do have dreams, they're related to the the injury in some way or the voices around you.
The stimuli around you.
Where in this case, it wasn't at all. He had an entirely different life.
Within a few minutes or seconds or whatever. That's terrifying.
You just sit there and there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the lamp and you can't place why it's wrong.
Oh, I hate that. Every time I think about it, I get goosebumps.
Crazy. And then continuously seeing your son out of the corner of your eye and you can't hear what he's saying, but he's talking to you.
God. I imagine the sun is like a psychological after image. Like when you get a flash of light in your eyes and then for a while you just see that kind of flash is still there, like a shadow in your periphery. It's like that.
What if he actually entered a parallel universe and he's seeing glimpses of it because he's already been there before and now he's sensitive to it?
I can't. Every time I think about it, I get goosebumps.
Isn't this so weird?
But not even because it's creepy, because it's terrifying. How heartbreaking would that be? That would ruin your life.
Easily. Knowing a love like that and then having it ripped away and knowing it never existed at all.
The last part especially. It never existed at all. Like tangible loss, like death. You have the validation of a grave at least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Of something like that. Of a photo or whatever, that it happened.
You don't have that reassurance from everybody around you to go like, hey, buddy, I'm so sorry.
Right.
No
one can share the memory with you.
Right. In this case, no one can share that memory with you. You just have to grieve for it on your own.
And then you probably feel like a crazy person because you're grieving for something that never existed.
And nobody will understand because who has gone through that? Probably a very limited amount of people. Right. You know how many groups there are for widows? Mm-hmm. A lot.
Right.
How many groups are there for people who had a dream that never really existed? For not a lot.
Metaphysical widowers. That's heavy, man. Yeah. I hate that.
Yeah, reading that for the first time, I was just like, oh. Anyways, that freaked me out.
That was good.
I hope you guys are tantalized now.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just jump straight into the
Okay, yeah, let's jump into the episode. So this episode is kind of all over the place.
Well, you said Soviet and conspiracy, and that's what I ran with.
Okay, yeah. The vibe here is conspiracies, also like aliens, UFO.
Unidentified flying objects, UFOs.
And there are some ties to the Reds, so let's jump into it.
Sharing their curiosity to know the unknown, their tension, their readiness for inconceivable adventure.
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly?
We choose to go to the moon.
The dawn of the space age.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
What is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
They had kept their mouth shut because they'd been threatened by the government.
Unbelievable. Fantastic. But I tell you, it could happen.
Just to set the mood a little bit, I'm going to be talking about the Soviet space program. This is during the space race between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, or the USSR, between 1955 and 1972. Each nation was pushing their scientific resources to the extreme as they tried to determine kind of which one was better, communism or democracy. That's kind of what the space race turned into, who could have the most accomplishments in space, and that kind of determined which one was better and which one worked better. So it was an extremely heated time point, and I don't know, it led to lots of good science though, so that's kind of cool.
I think that's the key to it, is that communism brings us good science.
Yeah. So here we are. Soviet space program consisted of several of the rocket and space exploration programs by the USSR from the 30s until the collapse in 1991. But it was responsible for a lot of pioneer breakthroughs. So the first intercontinental ballistic missile, the first satellite, first animal in Earth orbit, first human in space and Earth orbit, first woman, spacewalk, moon impact.
God damn.
Yeah, first image of the far side of the moon, unmanned lunar soft landing, first space rover, sample of lunar soil, and first space station.
And baby's first Christmas.
Right. So they did a lot of different shit.
That's pretty wild.
Even with all these amazing advancements, it didn't come without a cost. As you can imagine, they're rushing all this shit. So obviously there were casualties.
A lot of blow-ups. A lot of stuff blowing up.
A lot of blow-ups.
Yeah.
Some big ones. In 1960, a Soviet rocket ignited on a launch pad, killing at least 78 of the ground crew.
Jesus.
Which then is a fuck ton of people. Like, now it's a fuck ton of people, but like
70. I don't even know. I don't know 78 people.
That's a ton of people.
That's so many.
In 1961, a Soviet cosmonaut was killed when a fire erupted inside an oxygen-rich training capsule. Which is like the fucking worst way to die, I feel like. Yeah. Just being burned to death in a capsule and no one can get you out.
And you're training. Like, you're not
and
even there.
And you're training, yeah.
It's like
and you already died.
I'm practicing.
Fucking well, that kind of like show you how intense the training was.
Right.
You know, how dangerous even that was. And they're not even in space yet. And then in 1967, another cosmonaut was killed when a parachute failed. So these are like the more well-known casualties, but you can imagine how many there were. And as far as the people knew, in the Soviet Union, the space program had never experienced a failure.
Well, that's a big issue with the Soviets is they disagreed with a lot of facts. They hid a lot. It's very bizarre. They lied a lot. Like,
well, it's not lying if you just don't talk about it.
That's true. Yeah.
That's kind of what their strategy was. So, like you mentioned, one thing that the Soviets are really known for is being extremely secretive. Most Soviet citizens didn't even know anything beyond the really ambiguous messages the government would put out. Mm-hmm. But other than that, they didn't get any intel on what the rockets looked like, the names of the cosmonauts.
That's terrible.
Yeah, they got nothing. And it was like a struggle with the government of keeping it secret so that no one else would know about the program and their accomplishments, but also wanting to brag about it so they could be like, hey, socialism and communism rules. Like, look at all this stuff we're doing.
Right.
But you would think the citizens at least would know.
Well, I think
a
lot
good
of it,
amount,
a lot of
but
it too
they didn't.
Is, yeah, because Soviets were really into like knowing everybody else's business,
right?
And I think that's like a symptom of that because they know that they have spies everywhere, and anybody else could have spies everywhere,
right?
And word gets out really quick.
For sure, that kind of led into why most failures were buried or they weren't released because they kind of wanted to promote their agenda
and always look good.
Yeah, and just look good. Yeah, they don't want to be known for their failures. They want to be known for their successes.
If at first you don't succeed, erase all evidence that you ever tried.
Like literally, like they didn't release it, so they just assumed they were constantly having these successes because they never released when something failed, like when someone died. But with this, conspiracy theories kind of popped out, as you can imagine. When you know nothing, you kind of have to speculate about what's going on.
Sure.
One of the big theories is called the lost cosmonauts or the phantom cosmonauts. So that's what they called like their astronauts. It just sounds cooler, I guess.
It really does, honestly.
It does.
Cosmonauts.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Lost cosmonauts. That sounds fucking cool as hell.
That's a book somewhere.
Right.
100%.
Absolutely. So this is a conspiracy theory alleging that Soviet cosmonauts went to outer space before Yuri Gagarin. So he was the first man
to make it back.
To go to space and orbit Earth. So he ended up making it back. But the lost cosmonaut theory dictates that the Soviet Union attempted to launch 2 or more manned space flights prior to Gagarin's, and at least 2 cosmonauts died in those attempts, if not more. But their existence was never publicly acknowledged by the Soviets or Russian authorities because they were lost in space.
Ooh.
When they finally got Yuri out in space to orbit Earth and got him back, then they kind of celebrated that accomplishment. But since they lost the others, they never disclosed it to anyone.
Wow. Just like a paper airplane. Let's just chuck this guy into space.
Yeah, like
and he's gone.
I mean, if you think like they're rushing so much, like things are going to go wrong. Like there's going to be failures.
Right. But they don't care because like they're in a position where people are expendable.
Right. And nobody knows about the failures. As far as you know, they've had 50 successes and 0 failures. Another cosmonaut, Vladimir Ilyushin, is believed to have landed off course and was held by the Chinese government. The Soviet Union supposedly suppressed this information to prevent the bad publicity during the Cold War. So he wasn't like necessarily lost in space, but he was like off course and he landed somewhere he wasn't supposed to and held by the Chinese government, which like could be a huge failure.
Right. Or what I would do, crash land there, play it off like you're an alien, and then hope that they worship you.
That's true. I'm an alien that looks exactly like you. I have cloned myself.
A Russian guy does not look like an Asian guy.
That's true.
Enough to where you'd be like, oh, damn.
But they have 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyeballs and 2 nose holes and 1 mouth.
They don't know that. They could be hiding under your spacesuit.
Oh my god.
Or the spacesuit could be part of your skin. Just play it out. Get creative with it, is all I'm saying. That's all it is, Vlad. Come on. Put that liberal arts degree to good use.
Oh my god. Okay. A lot of classified documents were released after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. There was an information leak by a Czech high-ranking communist. He reported many unofficial space shots, including a cosmonaut being launched inside a converted rocket. So they tried to disguise the space missions by converting a rocket, basically, to, like, hide what they were actually doing.
What do you mean by converting a rocket?
I mean that it was, like, a ballistic rocket that they converted to be, like, a spaceship.
Oh, shit. In my mind, I'm still thinking, like, a rocket's a spaceship.
Yeah, no. Not like a... space rocket.
I'm a child.
No, you're good.
A rocket really is like a missile.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily manned.
Right. So this guy said that they like converted a rocket to be able to hold a astronaut and shot it into space, and they did that to like hide what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But he reported many unofficial space projects like that happened before Yuri Gagarin went into space and orbited Earth for the first time.
Okay.
He released 3 more names that were claimed to have died or lost in space prior to him. Pioneering space theoretician Herman Oberth claimed that a pilot had been killed on a suborbital ballistic flight in early 1958. So he's a smart guy, so we should definitely trust what he has to say.
Yes. This guy wore a sweater vest,
oh my God.
Listen to him.
He was a pioneering space guy.
Yeah.
He knows what he's talking about. And then in December of 1959, an Italian news agency repeated the claims that a series of cosmonaut deaths on suborbital flights had been revealed by a high-ranking Czech communist. So that kind of propelled the conspiracy because it got out to like another government.
And by then you're screwed. Yeah.
Oh, right. And then everyone was like, thank God we're not like those losers.
Those losers that don't know how to launch people into the sky.
Right.
Because really all you're doing, if they're not coming back, it's not as impressive when you say, oh, we know how to throw people and they never come back.
Right.
We made a cannon, essentially. A space cannon.
A football is not as impressive as a boomerang.
As a man with a family.
Right. Oh, my God. In 1960, science fiction writer Heinlein reported that while traveling
wait, he has one name?
Yes. He reported that while traveling to the USSR, he met Red Army cadets who told him that there had recently been a manned space launch. So this was like 1 year before Yuri went out into space.
Okay.
And they said
so we know there's been more people that...
Yeah, and they told him that they had seen manned space flights going into space. But what happened was the launch capsule had a guidance system failure, so it was steered in the wrong direction, the space rocket was.
Jesus.
So this made retrieval impossible, and the ship was stranded in orbit around Earth.
These poor guys.
Right?
What the fuck? They're not even looking into it. They're just like, it failed last time, do it again, do it again.
Right, we'll fix it this time. Leading from that, 2 Italian amateur radio operators
Here we go. These are my heroes.
These are the science people. Allegedly picked up a number of radio transmissions that they claimed were from the doomed Soviet space launches. Can you imagine fucking around with a radio and then you get like transmissions from someone who's lost in space?
It's also in a different language, so like you probably would
translate it. And can you imagine like translating it and you're like,
oh shit,
SOS.
Yeah.
Ah.
But in Russia, it's like
So a pair of brothers from Turin claimed they began monitoring the Soviet space program transmissions in 1957, and that these transmissions prove that Yuri wasn't the first man in space. They claimed that in November of 1960, they picked up an SOS transmission in Morse code coming from a Soviet spacecraft. They determined this craft was moving away from Earth, and that this meant the Soviets had accidentally launched their cosmonauts deep into space.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, that's terrible. But
right,
God.
Fucking horrifying.
Oh, we accidentally launched a man into space.
And we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to try again.
Oh, man. As long as he's out of view, like, oh, he's gone? Okay, we're fine.
Yeah, if we don't talk about it, then it didn't happen. Right. The brothers made 9 recordings they claimed were emergency transmissions from Soviet cosmonauts being launched away from Earth.
How many?
9.
Oh my. Jesus Christ. That's
Right.
9 lives.
That's 9 lives at least.
That's 1 cat.
One of these recordings, there was a woman's voice that could be heard saying in Russian that she can see flames and asking mission control if her ship is about to explode.
That's
Fucking
scary. But
hell.
also good for them for you doing a female astronaut.
Yeah. So the first female astronaut wasn't actually the first female astronaut.
No. Well,
and the one that was forgotten for forever because she died. So is this theory believable?
Yes. Yes.
Up to you. The Soviets obviously denied all the allegations.
Of course they did.
And the Russians denied all of it too. Is that really surprising? Some rebuttals that people have said to side with the Soviets. Is that the side you want to pick?
Yeah. I think it's been long enough to where we know it's the right side of history.
Right. They say that the Luna probes had no room to fit cosmonauts who were supposedly fired into the moon's surface. One of the rockets had no re-entry shield, which suggests there were never any plans for the capsule to survive the trip.
Wow.
Which is fucked.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't prove anything in my mind. It just tells me the Soviets are fucked.
Yeah, they're just like, you're not coming back.
And this is the last rebuttal, the strongest, if you ask me.
Okay.
There is no mention of the lost cosmonauts in declassified documents, so therefore there are no secretive documents that exist.
Never mind, yeah.
It's not mentioned, therefore it didn't happen.
Yep.
Sorry.
They're just like, okay, so we have to keep this classified because it's really bad, and if it ever gets out, everyone's going to hate us. And the one guy was just like, how about we just never write it down? Everyone's like, oh my God, let's run an entire government on this.
What if we write it down but then destroy it before anyone can actually find it?
Right, that's stuff that all governments do.
That's true. See, I feel like what they did is declassify certain documents so that it had more weight when they...
Yes, that's smart.
And then they didn't release this because why would they want to admit to it? They don't.
Right, exactly. Now we're whispering.
Oh my God. So...
Imagine knowing that you're sending a man or woman to their death in the sky.
They didn't give a shit. They wanted that space race win. They wanted that gold medal.
They wanted that moon money.
Right, and then you think about, the Soviets did so many firsts, and it doesn't matter because the U.S. got a man on the moon first.
And all those people died in vain because no one even knows or remembers.
No one even cares, yeah.
That makes me feel like I need to take a shower. So I will also be dealing with some conspiracy. Some of what I'm going to say for this story is pure conjecture. Some of it is, I think, very likely. I got a lot of it from different sources on the internet, but most importantly, a huge source comes from Area 51, an uncensored history of America's top secret military base by Annie Jacobsen.
Wow.
Really interesting book. So if we're going to start this off the Jeremy way, we got to start with some vocab.
Fuck yeah.
Just to give some of this some more weight. Propaganda is going to play a big part in this.
Who?
Ganda. So... There are 3 types of propaganda. There is white propaganda, which has nothing to do with Caucasians. White propaganda is propaganda that doesn't hide its origin or nature. So it comes from a source that is identified correctly and openly, and the info that they convey is typically accurate. So if, let's say, the U.S. finds out that Germany dropped a
baby.
Dropped a loaf. Let's say that Germany... did some poisoning to some diplomat in Russia.
Yeah.
And we told the Russian people, hey, don't trust Germany. They did this. Signed the U.S. government. That would be white propaganda because we're saying, hey, this is from us. This is what happened. This is the truth. And we're not trying to hide it. The downside is that the sender is trying to convince the other person that they're a good guy. Think of like a TV election ad where some guy goes, Mike Foster took money from the poor.
Oh, God.
He's a bad guy. That's why you shouldn't vote for him. And it's like, this was funded by the campaign for William Hurt.
The pedophile.
William Hurt, which is an actor. I shouldn't have picked that name. You don't know that, but I know that, which is distracting for me.
Sorry. Sorry you made that choice.
So it's telling you, here's some bad stuff. By the way, I won't do that. You get the idea. Let's go to black propaganda, which is propaganda that is credited to a false source with the intent of spreading lies, fabrications, and deceptions.
This feels racist.
Well, think of black like a black storm cloud.
Oh, God.
An example of this is like a hoax or wartime propaganda. So like the Soviets being like, we're doing great out there with the rockets.
Oh, my God.
But they would do it in a Russian accent.
With the rockets.
Out here in the Soviet Union, where we are about to chuck a man into the stars.
Oh, Wow.
He's waving goodbye to his wife one last time.
Right, before he explodes in a fiery death.
The propaganda we're going to be talking about here is mainly black. So let's backtrack just a second and go to World War II. Just so you know, the Allied powers, which is like the quote-unquote good guys, not quote-unquote, they were the better guys because the Nazis were the other option.
Yeah.
So those were Great Britain, France, United States, and Russia. Now, the Axis powers were Germany, Italy, and Japan. U.S. and Soviet Union were both sort of forced into the war when you think about it. The U.S. was through the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and the Soviets were forced into their position as allies through the invasion from the Nazis. I mean, obviously, I'm like footnote to the footnote to the footnote. World War II ends after the atomic bomb is made and dropped on Japan, and everyone gets freaked out.
Like, oh,
oh man, that was a big bomb.
I don't want that. Okay, fine.
I want to talk about the Manhattan Project. We talked about black propaganda. There's these things that are called black operations, born classified stuff. Congress doesn't know about it, essentially.
Oh, shit.
And that's what the Manhattan Project was.
So I'm assuming the Manhattan Project is the creation of the atom bomb?
Oh, yeah. So the Manhattan Project employed roughly around 200,000 workers. It had dozens of production plants across the country, including a 60,000-acre facility in rural Tennessee that pulled more power off the nation's electrical grid than New York City did any given night. And nobody knew about it. President Truman didn't know about it until he became president.
Can you imagine?
That'd be insane. I would have a panic attack.
I would resign.
Yeah, I'm good.
I don't want to.
Isn't that shit wild?
200,000 people, and no one knew about it.
However, with some Soviet espionage, it's believed that they did have moles in the Manhattan Project. So they had an idea of what was going on. Because how quiet can you really keep 200,000 people?
Right.
Which led to them eventually making their own atomic bombs, which is when the real Cold War starts. After World War II, we keep on using bombs. Eventually, we both had nukes, and we were both terrified of each other. And despite this, it should be known that Nazi Germany had some crazy genius scientists on their side. Like, they were like some of the smartest minds.
Germany has so many smart people.
I don't know how that works.
Like, honestly, they do, like, so many amazing scientists and doctors and, like, researchers.
And back in the day, some of the best scientists in America came from the Nazis.
Yeah,
Have you ever heard of Operation Paperclip?
No.
Okay, Operation Paperclip is where, after World War II, there was a battle for who could kidnap, like, the best Nazi scientists between the Allies. We defeated the Nazis. Okay, we get to pick the best Nazis that we want to bring back on our team, except everyone was just kidnapping Nazis.
I thought they were, like, recruited.
Oh, no, it was like a full-on, like, so an agency, which was the precursor to the CIA. I believe it was the OSS. I'm not sure, though. I think it might have been an in-between phase of the CIA. They sort of just scoured Europe and all across the globe for imprisoned or runaway Nazi scientists.
That's so weird to think about. I didn't know any of this.
Germany already had a bunch of smart people, but when the war started to go sour for Hitler, he recalled all of the brilliant minds out of service. Like, if they were working in any way with the war effort, he pulled them back, said, go in that laboratory, figure out how to win me this war because we're getting scared now. And so,
it's just like cattle.
Exactly.
Hey, use your brain to create inventions.
These people were all placed on this list called the Ossenberg list, which was later used by the U.S. Army major to select the most valuable men to steal. So he looked at this list, he said, here's the guys that I want. And two of the guys that he picked were like on the board of directors for NASA. Like, we would not have gotten to the moon if it weren't for the Nazis. Meanwhile, the Soviets, they're doing the same grind right now. Area 51. Buckle up, kids. We're going there. This is going to be one heck of a field trip. So, Area 51 is a secret test base where the CIA was running spy plane programs. It started as a secret base hidden within a base that saw studies and testing with atomic weapons. The testing grounds that Area 51 resides in is almost the size of Connecticut. And no one's allowed on it because it's government run. Yeah, the Nevada test site. In 1951, 105 nuclear weapons were exploded above ground at this test site, and another 828 were exploded underground.
What the fuck?
Gee, right? 828.
Oh,
they did this in tunnels and like mine shafts and stuff. Why is it called Area 51? It's because it's the 51st parcel of land on this grid system they used to divvy out the land. But in the book that I was talking about, the author claims that she has sources that say the reason it's called Area 51 is because in 1951, they received the remains of a flying saucer that they tested specifically on that parcel of land, which prompted them to call it Area 51, allegedly. It was also a base camp for black operations to combat Stalin's black propaganda of UFOs. Just to give you an idea of who Joseph Stalin was, Adolf Hitler was quoted as calling Stalin a cold-blooded blackmailer
Oh, shit.
If Hitler calls you that, you got to work on some things.
Mm-hmm.
So Stalin put into effect black propaganda about UFOs. We're going to deal with Roswell. That's what this is leading to.
Okay, so here's the weird thing.
Yeah.
When people talk about UFOs, most people know about Roswell, but they don't actually know what it is.
It's kind of part of American folklore at this point.
Right.
They have like some vague idea of Roswell, and they know it exists, and they know UFOs are involved, but they don't know the story of Roswell. And it's not really talked about that often, I feel like, which is weird because of how famous it is. And I was one of those people. I didn't really know anything about Roswell. To educate myself, I was like, well, we're doing a UFO episode, vaguely, so I will educate myself and others on Roswell.
Yeah.
So I'll get right into it. It all started in the summer of 1947 when a rancher discovered unidentifiable debris in a sheep pasture outside Roswell, New Mexico. So there you go. That's Roswell.
Whoa.
The big dispute for the Roswell sighting was the Air Force asserted that it was a crashed weather balloon, but many people believed it was the remains of an extraterrestrial flying saucer, or a UFO. So a series of what are called dummy drops in New Mexico happened during the 1950s, which heightened the suspicions. So nearly 50 years after the story of the...
What are dummy drops?
I'm going to get into it.
Oh, okay.
So nearly 50 years after the story of the mysterious UFO sighting, the U.S. military issued a report. They basically leaked their own document stating that the incident was a top-secret atomic espionage project called Project Mogul. However, even though the military released this report... People still believe that it's a UFO, and they just released this document retroactively to cover it up. Hundreds of people still visit Roswell every year to see the crash site, even though nothing's there anymore, obviously. The government sweeped all that up and shoved it in their...
Asshole.
Shoved it right in their asshole. But people like to look at the dirt it was on, I guess.
The dirt in their asshole. I'm
sorry. So to get more in specifics of the incident. One morning around Independence Day in 1947... Independence Day. Did that ring any bells for you?
Yeah, the Will Smith effect.
Yeah. About 75 miles from the town of Roswell, New Mexico, a rancher named Mac Brazel found something unusual in his sheep pasture. A mass of metallic sticks held together with tape, with a bunch of plastic and foil in there, scraps of really heavy, glossy paper-like material.
That sounds like high-tech alien technology.
So as a rancher, you can imagine anything that's shiny is strange. Wow.
Is this a telephone?
Weird.
Is this one of them TVs I've been hearing about?
Foil. I've never seen it before. This is 1947, where foil was only for the extreme rich. Naturally unable to identify what the fuck this thing was, Brazel called the Roswell sheriff. The sheriff then called the officials at the nearby Army Air Force Base, where soldiers fan out across the field, gathering the mysterious debris and whisking it away in armored trucks.
That's where the conspiracy comes in.
So why did they need so many people if it was just a weather balloon?
And why was the trucks armored? That's what I want to know.
Right. Why were there armored trucks? Why were there so many Air Force people there? Why was it such a big deal if it was just a weather balloon?
A balloon. Is that armored truck so that nobody can get in, or so that nobody can get out?
It's so they can carry balloons.
That's right. It's standard government balloon trucks.
So this is like a fun fact. The Project Mogul team invented a lot of high-tech materials for its balloons and other equipment, including ultra-lightweight and ultra-strong metals, things like fiber optic cables and fireproof fabrics. So this is part of the reason why some people who saw the debris thought it came from outer space. It didn't look or behave like anything they had ever seen before. So, disclaimer, might have actually been a weather balloon.
Don't say that to me. Don't ever say that to me. That's not where I thought this was going.
So on July 8th, the newspapers were riddled with mysterious spacecraft landed in Roswell, New Mexico, and naturally it swept the nation. But was it true?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was true.
True.
Yeah. Unidentified flying object landed in Roswell, New Mexico. But people who have seen the debris said it was clear that whatever this thing was, it was no weather balloon. So more information on the dummy drops and what those are. During the 1950s, the Air Force essentially was doing these experiments, meant to test ways for pilots to survive falls from high altitudes. And they would send bandaged, featureless dummies with latex skin and aluminum bones, quote, dummies that looked an awful like space aliens falling from the sky onto the ground, where the military vehicles will descend upon them and retrieve the bodies as quickly as possible.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is what the Air Force said it was. So it was a weather balloon.
Yes.
And then it wasn't a weather balloon. It was actually a dummy drop where they made it look like an alien and would drop them randomly. And then, we have to like go catch it really quick.
To me, this sounds like they're trying to save face. They're changing their story.
Yeah, they're definitely changing their story. So like all the skeptics.
Because when you change your story like that, especially as the government, that's just very sketchy.
Yeah, it definitely made them more suspicious.
Right.
So there were a lot more skeptics after this came out. Like, if you were going to say it's a weather balloon, you might as well just stick to the weather balloon. Like, I wonder if some guy just jumped the gun on that explanation.
I'll actually touch on the retraction they made about the weather balloon, because there is something potentially that explains that.
So people were convinced that the dummies were actually extraterrestrial creatures, aliens, who were being kidnapped and experimented on by government scientists. This was the belief among the country, I guess.
Among the crackpots.
Right. Roswell and the Project Mogul. Again, Project Mogul was...
dropping dummies and picking them up?
Yeah, creating like materials and things within the government.
Can we drop a human on the ground?
Right.
Can they survive?
It turned out the Army knew more about the rancher's flying saucer than they originally had let on. Since World War II, a group of geophysicists and oceanographers from Columbia University, New York University, and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, wow, those are a lot of words, on Cape Cod, have been working on a top-secret atomic espionage project they called Project Mogul. Project Mogul used really sturdy high-altitude balloons to carry low-frequency sound sensors into the faraway part of Earth's atmosphere that acts as a sound channel. In this part of the atmosphere, sound waves can travel for thousands of miles without interference, a lot like the ocean.
Okay.
I guess that's why they had so many like oceanographers participating.
Because whale sounds are like that, right?
Yeah, they can travel really, really far, and they were trying to do this in Earth's atmosphere as well. The scientists believe that they could be able to eavesdrop on nuclear tests as far away as the Soviet Union.
Okay, there we go. It all leads back to the Soviets.
Yeah, so basically Project Mogul was a ploy by the government to spy on the Soviets, as it always does.
Goddamn Reds.
And they were using these weather balloons as some kind of like microphone sound channel type device. According to the U.S. military, the debris outside Roswell actually belonged to Project Mogul. It was the remains of a 700-foot-long string of neoprene balloons, radar reflectors for tracking purposes, and sonic equipment that the scientists had launched from the base in June and that had crashed in early July. Because the project was extremely classified, it was very secretive because they don't want the Soviets knowing, obviously. Mm-hmm. No one at the Roswell Army Field even knew that it existed, and they had no idea what to make of the objects that they had found. So they came up with the weather balloon story because it was simple and it was the most plausible explanation that they could come up with on such short notice.
Right.
Honestly, I would believe it. A weather balloon? Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think this was definitely before people started to really question the government. Because nowadays, like, we question the government immediately, right?
Right. Apparently in 1994... the Pentagon declassified most of its files on Project Mogul and the dummy drops that it did. So the dummy drops were actually a thing that they did with Project Mogul, supposedly.
Right.
And the Federal General Accounting Office produced a report designed to debunk the alien rumors. But, like anything, people are going to believe what they want to believe. And thousands of people still subscribe to the UFO theory that there was aliens that landed at Roswell back in 1947, and now it's hard to really disprove because the people who are alive,
they're all gone.
Yeah, they're all gone now, and people are just going to be hearing stories that they had from their grandpa,
right?
And they're going to listen to that like it's gospel.
Yeah. So what I'll be talking about does touch on Roswell in a different light that you just touched on. So the book I read, however, which was also grounded with a shit ton of sources from official old dudes that worked with the CIA and all these people to cover up what Roswell really was. That's kind of tough to say. What Roswell really was. So to understand the fear behind UFOs and Roswell, we have to jump back one last time to October 30th, 1938. There was a radio drama called The War of the Worlds. Are you familiar with this?
No, I am not.
Okay. The War of the Worlds was a science fiction radio drama adapted from an H.G. Wells novel that was made in 1898, and it was adapted to be more modern. And this radio broadcast caused what is commonly described as mass hysteria across the country. The program opened up with a prologue, which was read by actor Orson Welles. I don't know if you know who that is, but he went on to become a very famous screen actor. Mm-hmm. So Orson Welles comes on and says, "Hey, everybody, this is the radio show. It's about an alien invasion." The show itself isn't like a radio drama. It's told as if you're listening to a regular news bulletin, which is then interrupted with news of the fictional alien invasion. Huh. So for people who turned on the radio after the prologue and didn't hear the setup, they thought a real news bulletin was being interrupted with news of this alien invasion. And they had like a
that would be so horrifying.
Yeah. And this is back in, 1938? We didn't know anything. We were so naive back then. The radio was telling you the truth. People allegedly started just freaking out. Now, the actual numbers of how many people it affected are sometimes exaggerated, so I'm not sure. I just do know that I had like a history teacher whose father was a kid when this happened. His grandfather had gotten his father on a boat, and they were rowing out to the middle of a lake to where there was an island because that's how afraid they were. They wanted to go to an island. So people took this really seriously.
Right.
And what that did was the government was watching, and they said, okay, well, if something like this happens, we can never let the public know, because look what they'll do.
Yeah.
But also, other countries' governments were watching, specifically the Soviets. And they said, wow, Americans are really afraid of UFOs. We could probably use this in the future against them. Plotting. Wow. Mr. Stalin, you're always thinking.
Building it up. So I would do if I was a Soviet.
So the following is truly a conspiracy theory because it goes against popular belief of what Roswell was all about. I'm someone who judges information kind of harshly. I just want to let you know that this is conjecture to a certain degree, but the speculation is actually backed up by a lot of great sources, which makes me very privy to keep an open mind to this.
Yeah.
So Roswell, New Mexico. During the first week of July 1947, the U.S. Signal Corps engineers began to track two objects with unseen flying capabilities flying through the southwest states. So they get on the radar and they go, whoa, it's like every UFO movie. Like, whoa, these things are moving at impossible speeds. What's up with this?
Oh my God.
Huh? It flies normal. This is what's weird about it. It's flying normal, like forward, like a normal plane, but it seems to occasionally stop and hover. It's got hover technology, which is we got nothing like this at all.
This is like before microwaves.
Yeah. We knew about the thing microwaves.
Yeah, the actual microwaves.
Yeah,
not like a kitchen microwave.
So when other radar sources supported these sightings, Kirkland Army Air Force Base sent a fighter jet to track it, and the pilot never got a clear image of what he was chasing.
Right.
Then there was a crash in Roswell. And the Office of Joint Chiefs of Staff took control and reported to the crash site. They recovered some components of the aircraft. What was even weirder, though, is that the aircraft had no wings or tail. It was just a round fuselage. It was like a flying saucer.
Right.
But the publicly believed outcome is that it was a weather balloon, and it was all blown out of proportion. Now, in a 1994 declassified Army memo, it's actually referred to by the military as the flying disc. But they look through the wreckage, and they find inside the disc some very familiar markings. It was a language. Russian language.
Russian language.
Stamped into the metal of the thing. Like it was
the
made
aliens know Russian.
Yeah, the military shit their pants. They're like, oh, God, the Russians got the better Nazi scientists. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, okay, we're screwed. And they have hover technology now. They knew that the Russians had been taunting them by flying aircraft over Alaska, because that's close to Russia. But the fact that they had gotten to, New Mexico,
right,
and no one knew. So, okay, Russians could invade us so easily. Oh, my God.
Panic.
The government commences Operation Harass. Where
they're always, so straightforward, I feel
They kind of stopped with the cool names. They're just we're just going to harass some people.
Oh, right.
And in Operation Harass, it's where U.S.
Sounds like you're saying her ass.
Operation Harass. Yeah. The U.S. Army Intelligence, they go on a manhunt for the Horton brothers, which are two former Nazi engineers who they believed had designed the saucer-shaped aircraft. Now, these guys, if you look up the Horton brothers, they made some fucking gorgeous planes for the Nazis. And are essentially like the modern-day stealth bombers? Those black things that are kind of triangular and rounded?
Sure.
They're like the stealth bombers. They're black and they're
waving your hand around helps the visualization.
I don't know.
Those airplanes that go vroom, vroom.
Yeah, exactly. But they look like alien technology. So these guys are the ones that designed what's considered kind of the predecessor to that, which was the Horton Ho 229.
Horton Hears a Who.
Horton Hears a Who 229, which was like a rounded, very futuristic-looking Nazi stealth bomber with radar-absorbent paint that couldn't be picked up very well by radar. They thought, okay, that could be what we're dealing with here, is something like that, because the radars didn't pick it up super easily.
Right.
So let's find these goddamn Horton brothers. I couldn't find whether or not they had actually interrogated the Hortons or not, but some way around there they figured out that the Hortons didn't seem to be directly involved in any way. So they were either maybe interrogated or their blueprints were stolen by the Soviets. There was a source that said when they had taken in that disc that they had found with the Russian writing in it, they had taken it to Area 51. This was in the year 1951.
Yeah.
And they told the engineers, hey, reverse engineer this, figure out how it worked. After a couple of years, they figured it out. And they learned that it used EMF technology to hover.
Right.
However, here's where I think this stuff gets real messed up. The Russian lettering was not the only thing they found inside the aircraft. There were several small alien pilots. In our episode way back when, I briefly talked about Nazi experiments on humans.
Yeah.
And I talked about Joseph Mengele.
Okay, yeah.
The Nazi angel of death, and he did all these crazy experiments on Jewish prisoners. He was crazy. He was gross. Well, Operation Paperclip.
Thank God.
Who got Mengele?
Oh my God.
Potentially the Soviets.
Yeah.
This theory claims. And so I guess he had made a deal with Stalin, and Stalin's like, we'll take care of you. I got some ideas about aliens and UFOs trying to scare the Americans. And Mengele's like, yes, sir, Mr. Stalin. I'd love to do that. And then Stalin has Joseph Mengele experiment on these bodies of what we believe to be children, somewhere along the age of 13. We don't know if they were disabled children, however, but the way the sources describe the bodies found in the craft, really disturbing and inhuman looking, where they had enlarged craniums, big eyes, no noses.
Ugh.
You gotta imagine like these guys opening up the spacecraft. They're like, okay, this is literally aliens.
Mutilated bodies, yeah.
Well, they were alive still. Yeah. Which ultimately comes into question, how did a bunch of deformed kids fly an aircraft?
Yeah.
But it's believed that perhaps it was jettisoned off of like a bigger ship and flown around.
Right, and it just coasted.
Yeah, until it crashed. So there was a Roswell news bulletin fairly quickly, and this man named Walter Haut, he was a press officer from Roswell Army Airfield, and he gave the original press release on the radio saying that the Air Force was in possession of what they called a flying disc. Came out right away and said it.
Right, it's Frisbee.
Then, exactly. Sorry, guys. My bad. Then 3 hours later, there was a retraction. Walter Haut was sent back to give a second press release, which explained that the first release was incorrect. It was, in fact, like a weather balloon. So, Walter Haut died in 2005. And when he died, he left a sworn affidavit to be opened after his death. In the text, Haut said the second press release was fraudulent and served to cover up the original release. Haut also swore that the Air Force had recovered strange bodies from the crash site, writing, quote, I am convinced that what I personally observed was some kind of aircraft and its crew from outer space.
Shit.
Yeah. To get more specific, in this little book...
It's not little.
It's not little. It's a big-ass book.
It's a big-ass book.
The last chapter, the author talks about this one source that she had that told her what was inside the aircraft. He was an engineer that worked for Area 51. And when they received those bodies, there was like 5 of them.
Yeah.
Most of them died. 2 of them were comatose. So they were able to keep 2 on life support. What they did was they shipped them into Area 51 in 1951.
Yeah.
They didn't hire surgeons. They hired engineers to observe these bodies. They were tasked to cut them open and see what was done to them, what was changed.
Right.
The author makes the point of saying to this engineer, why didn't Truman ever come out with this information? This would be the perfect way to combat that black operation, to say, look how depraved the Russians are. Look what they would do to scare us. Look what they would do to these bodies. The engineer answered, because we did the same thing.
What does that mean?
Oh, exactly. He becomes very emotional when he's talking about this, and he says that he never told his wife about it. He tries not to think about it. And when he retired, it was still going on. They were still trying to perfect what they had started.
Shit.
To where there was experimentations up until the 80s.
Of like creating these monster alien-looking people?
Potentially for a similar black operation. That's where the book leaves off on. And
damn, that's a cliffhanger.
I know, right? Where it ends, she paints this really cool picture where she's at a restaurant with this guy, and they're eating food, and she gets a crouton from her salad. She puts it on a plate, and she said, okay, if everything you've told me is this crouton, do I even know half of it? And then the guy said, no, the full story is bigger than the crouton. It's the whole table and chairs. For the most part, the book does not touch on like whether or not aliens are real. It touches on black operations, what you can find through memos and declassified documents, and the fact that all of that is barely anything.
God,
like the
that's
stuff,
insane.
yeah, like the stuff
and
that
like
is
we'll
hidden
never
from
even
us.
really know.
No, it'll never be. Why would you? If it's that dark, all of that stuff is born classified. You know, you carry it to your grave.
Right.
Like I can't imagine carrying something like that to my grave. But again, it's because if I was an engineer, they wouldn't hire me because they would know that. I'm sure they figure out who can handle what.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that was a very interesting...
Yeah, I'll have to steal that book from you sometime.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really interesting little crooked chapter of our history. And is potentially still going on today.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes the scariest answer isn't what's most mystical. It's just the truth of it.
Yeah. Either it was a dummy drop by Project Mogul, it was the actual balloon, or it was the Soviets.
Or it was the Soviets.
It could be the Soviets. Can you imagine how great of a prank that would be for the Soviets to just never say anything at all?
Yeah.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please follow us on Facebook or Instagram at According to an Idiot. We also have a Twitter at Idiots Accord. If you would like to give us any recommendations, comments, concerns, topics you would like us to discuss, you can email us at accordingtoanidiot@gmail.com. And if you really, really liked us, you can leave a review on iTunes so more people can find us. And tell all your friends and have podcast listening parties and tell them to subscribe. And we'll, I don't know, have T-shirts at some point. So, I don't
know. You're just talking to yourself at this point.
You guys won't know this having listened to it, but these are two totally different recordings that we decided to mash together. So if it sounds slightly off to you, that might be why.
We Frankensteined it.
And you're only finding out at the end, so you won't have noticed as much. If we told you in the beginning, you would have noticed. But now that it's the end, surprise.
We pranked you.
We pranked you.
We got you. You should have seen the look on your face.
Yeah, but this is future us.
Yeah.
You might have heard past us a little bit. You definitely heard past us.
You definitely heard past us.
So this is us now, wishing you a happy new year. And my good vibes for this episode will be setting goals and shopping and new shoes. I got some new kicks and I feel like a brand new woman and I'm excited about it. I put a whole new I don't know.
Wardrobe can change you. It's good.
Wardrobe can definitely change you, and I feel spicy now.
Yeah, you smell spicy.
Oh, yeah.
Kaylee, you want to hear my good vibration?
Yes, I do.
I found this out. You ever heard of...
I did.
Have I ever heard of...
Have you ever heard?
Have you ever heard of a man named Vasily Arkhipov?
I have not, no.
Speaking of Soviets, Vasily was a Soviet Navy officer. He prevented nuclear annihilation. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was some sort of mishap where they misinterpreted an act of aggression that really wasn't. There's in this nuclear submarine, there's 3 naval officers who together had to come to the consensus to launch a nuke from the submarine.
Okay.
To detonate it.
Oh, yeah.
And it came down to them.
Detonate that nuke.
3 guys. One of them was Vasily. Something had happened. I'm not even sure what.
Right.
Maybe a boat crossed over some territory. I'm probably wrong. I apologize.
It's always about boats.
It's always about boats. A bunch of guys and boats. I hate it. So 2 of the officers were like, yep, it's time to detonate. Let's nuke this place. And Vasily, a Soviet officer, noble to the Soviet Union, he says, no, you're going to end the world.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Vasily. Everybody say thank you to Vasily.
Thank you, Vasily.
Good.
Also, thanks for buying new shoes.
New shoes. Who can hate that?
I'm delusional right now. Okay.
So am I. I'm so tired, guys. Right now we're recording this at 11:30 right now.
Yeah, I have an hour drive home.
We recorded one episode already, and it didn't record, so here we are recording a second one.
Lord.
And I am burnt out.
I wish Vasily had just launched the nuke.
Well, we're ending it now, and I'm going to go drive home for an hour and pass the fuck out.
Farewell, everybody. I will see you in time.
Happy New